I'm Indra, and I'd like to welcome you to the Messy Middle Matters, where my friends and I explore all the twists, turns, and challenges that arise in the messy middle of work. Hi, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about getting started in a new role, like those first 90 days, and not just the stuff that, everybody knows to do. Like my father used to give the advice on the first day of any job, the 3 things that I would need to get sorted out beyond all the HR stuff to make sure I got paid was figure out where the coffee machine is, figure out where the bathroom is, and figure out where the emergency exits are. That every single job. And so there's certain things that are on your to-do checklist and certain things that, are not on your to-do checklist, but are really good best practices. So today, Amanda's going to be talking to me about this one. I'm excited about it. Exploring beyond the standard stuff that everyone tends to do.
Yeah. And can I just say that your father's advice, those 3 things, on point.
Completely. I mean, he was a little bit more paranoid. You can see what he valued most in life, just the practicalities of things. But he also had this thing. He's now deceased, so and I don't think he'd be upset over this story. He also worried about which floor of a building he was on because he always worked in Manhattan, and so he was always making sure that whatever possible, he would be on a low floor so that evacuation would be easier.
Right, yeah, fewer flights of stairs to walk down, yeah.
Practicalities of life, which I think apply beyond Manhattan, but anyway. Yeah, so Amanda, you and I have onboarded into more than one organization over the course of our careers. And, I think we've got a whole bunch of different things that we're going to share with everyone today about this stuff that have helped us succeed that are beyond that. Because there is the, like I said, making sure that you get everything set up to get your paycheck through, making sure that you can log into your computers, making sure all your devices work. There's just so much of that. It feels like a slog. It's a necessary slog, even in the best onboarding I've had, which actually was at the company that you and I worked at, Automox, which totally makes sense given what they specialize in. That was probably the smoothest technical onboarding. But there's been some bumpy ones. But beyond that, it is what makes you successful because it is your introduction to a new organization, a new set of people, even if you know some of them already from a past role. It's a brand new environment, so you're going to know them in a different way.
Totally. Yeah. I'm thinking of advice that I got from I don't even know who, but it's you only get to be new once, right? And that's why those first 90 days are so important. You are giving your first impressions to everyone. It's your opportunity to ask what could be simple questions, right? But you could, I always like to, I'm playing the new girl card. Can you explain this to me?
Yeah, no, I think that that's absolutely right. And this will shift and change depending on your role, depending on your career stage, depending on all that. So take all that within context, pull the things that are really useful for you, add your own stuff to the stuff that we're talking about. But 100%, it is when you are new to an organization, it's the only time that you can ask questions without assuming that you know the answers. And my favorite way to ask a question, whether I'm new to a project, new to an organization, new to whatever, is I just want to make sure, and this goes back to our first episode, Words Matter. I just got some new Words Matter stickers, so if you see me in the wild, find me. I always say, I know what these words mean to me, but what do they mean in the context of this organization, right? Because there is a lot of nuance. So, let's start with vocabulary, because that's one of our favorite things to talk about. I didn't know we were going to start there, but it is one of our favorite things to talk about. Figuring out what do those words mean here in this organization, it is worthwhile asking that foundational question and not assuming that that the word means what it's meant for you in every other company you've worked for, because often enough, it'll sneak up on you. You're like, whoa, how did that happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even words that or acronyms or jargon that seems very known across the industry may not mean the same thing or what you think it does in that particular organization.
100%. I wish I could remember what it was. Yesterday, I was at a presentation. It was focused on, it was a networking event, which was focused on AI. And they used an acronym that is very familiar. Everywhere else in the world is something else. And oh no, you know what it was? You'll like this one. It was RAG, RAG. And I cannot remember off the top of my head what RAG means. I remember the definition. I don't remember what the word stood for. But RAG to you and me, because we come from project, program, operations management. It's red, amber, green, red, yellow, green. Like, what's the status of the project? What's the RAG for that? Right? Now with the world of AI, RAG means something altogether different, right? So understanding what do you mean by RAG is really important as an example.
Yeah, when you said RAG, I was like, is it red, amber, green, or is it what it means in AI?
It's AI, right? Again, I can't remember, but somebody look it up. I'll throw it into our glossary so that everyone knows the other RAG too. I'll put the 2 RAG definitions.
Yeah, for me, I can't think of anything off the top of my head either, except for one organization I worked for used the word blocker in a strange way.
Really?
Like I was on a meeting and they were like, oh, like this particular thing is a blocker. And when I asked more questions, I was like, this isn't really a blocker. It's a dependency on another team. And they were like, no, it's a blocker. It's blocking me from doing work. And I'm like, no, but you're doing work. Like you can proceed. You are doing work. It's not blocking you.
There's
and
an
so
order of
it became a
operations.
whole discussion.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Order of operations is not a blocker to me.
Correct.
A blocker a blocker could be when the order of operations doesn't happen on schedule. That could become a blocker because now it's something you weren't planning for. It is not like the normal, typical flow of things. But a blocker is something you couldn't just halt all work from stopping for proceeding. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting. Yeah. So words. So words are one thing that you want to make sure that you do in your first 90 days. I think that the other thing that you were sort of alluding to is it's your first time when you were saying it's your first chance to make a first impression, right? It's your only chance to make that first impression as well, in addition to asking some foundational, fundamental questions that may actually not be clear to everybody in the organization, BT Debs, but there is that first chance to brand yourself as a person and set that. So you have, I know that you have certain strategies you use for doing that.
Yeah. What I like to do when I first join an organization is I'll ask around and I'll ask my manager, like, is there who should I meet? Right? Who should I start building these relationships with? And once I have that list, I will set up a one-on-one coffee chat with each person on that list. And I'll even throw in the agenda here, this can be casual. This can be about work. This is a very casual, no pressure. I just want to meet you. I just want to meet you because we'll be working together. Because I know some people might be like, oh, who's this new girl? What are we going to talk about? She's going to grill me on what I do every day. So I'll set the tone there, and I will just, I'll do my little intro tour, so to speak.
Yeah.
I'll meet the people who I'll be working with, whether that's, engineers on the team or go to market people or, whoever my manager or others think I should meet for whatever reason. And that's my opportunity to introduce myself, introduce what I do, introduce how I'm supposed to, how I will be helping the organization, start to field the questions and the pain points. Dependent, I'll suss it out, right? But there are some intro conversations where I've joined an organization and I was hired to solve specific problems in my first 90 days. So I'll take that and I'll run with it. And I'll be like, hey, I heard from so-and-so that you've been here since the beginning and know all of the pain points and, work on this project every day. How can I help you? And that's my opportunity to make that first impression. I'm I'm your ally. I'm not here to check boxes or, or spy on you or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And it's like bringing us back to the previous point of like asking the foundational questions. I usually ask two questions in those, like I call it a listening tour. Same.
Hmm.
And so I put two offers out on the table. The first is, if you could wave a magic wand and there's one thing that you would have me in my role with my capacity handle or deal with or resolve, what would it be? Because that
Hmm.
gives people permission to go off of the regular script, which I kind of love. But the
Yeah.
second question, which is the one that brings us back to the previous topic, is what what is a foundational question that you wish you could ask in a room, but you're not able to, that I can ask on your behalf? I won't out you, I promise. But what question would you want me to surface with that
I've
new
asked a
person
version
card?
of that question too, and it is really interesting to see people's response to that question.
Yeah. 100%. And, the thing that I will say about this, like two things might come to mind for people when they think about these listening tours or these one-on-one tours or whatever it might be, get to know you tours. They are very time consuming both for you and the other person. So keep in mind respecting that other person's time. I usually try and do it around their schedule. Be like, oh, this is a huge favor to me. I really, really appreciate it, but I wanted to make it worth your while. It's not just about me,
Yeah.
it's about you and unlocking something. So that's a positioning statement. But the other thing, which is insanely true, and for some reason my WeWork role is coming to my mind, you will never have as much time to have that many one-on-ones as you do in your first 2 weeks, because they haven't figured out which meetings to pull you into. They haven't figured out how to, even if they know logically, retraining that muscle memory takes a second, right? So you have a lot more time in your day to be able to do that. So take advantage of those first couple of weeks. Don't get offended if they say no and they push back, because they're going to have their schedules, unless it's I have to meet with you because I am directly supporting you. Thank you so much. But, take advantage of that quiet time that you have. So, pulling together that glossary of terms, which even if they have a glossary of terms, I'm sure it's incomplete and your stuff will augment it. So there's that. That's the first one for the first 90 days, which we've talked about in the past. Second one is a listening tour and going through all of that. Let's continue down the thread of people, organizational charts.
Yeah.
If you are so lucky, they come in so many different shapes and forms for all sorts of different purposes. But I have yet to meet an organization. I'm just trying to really go through all of them that has, it's rare. I'll say it's rare for an organization to have a org chart that explains all their business functions. So that's at the organization level, really clearly and well for somebody who's coming in net new. It makes sense to someone who's been there forever, but it may not make somebody who's green to that organization. So there's organization charts, and then there's literally reporting structures. I have not found stuff that's really useful for a first timer often in my career.
Agreed. I'm going through my job history and the org charts that existed at each job. And I agree with you. What I've used the actual, company provided org chart for
Usually out of the
has
HR
been,
system.
yeah, which is usually out of the HR system, is to figure out who's a peer versus the organizational hierarchy.
Okay.
But in terms of, titles, a lot of titles don't have that context, right? I'm thinking of, software engineering managers. Usually their titles are software engineering manager or software engineering manager too. And no context about what team they lead,
Right.
what business functions they play, what systems they work in or their teams work in. And those are usually my first questions when I meet with those people.
Yeah, I think,
hey, just so that we're clear, can we level set? What is your team responsible for?
well, and even who is on your team, because to your
Hmm.
point, the HR systems are set up in such a way to support all the things that HR needs to be able to support, which is making sure that titles are leveled, et cetera, et cetera. Reporting structures are, nobody is over indexed with too many or not enough direct reports, right? It's done in such a way to function really well, but it may not be, it is unlikely to be the way that the organization operates, right? Because most functions, like some functions are really clear and dedicated. Usually on the business side of things can be really clear, like, oh, they're part of this line of business, they part of this function, and it's super clear. Maybe in a sales organization, that might be the case, right? I don't, certain organizations might have that, but a whole lot of others are matrixed across the organization. They might sit in technology, they may sit in design, they may sit in, operations, they may sit in a PMO structure, they may sit in a lot of things, and who they're assigned out to and work with on a day-to-day basis will be much different. So understanding how, like, what somebody works on is really, really different than reporting structures.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's why, because caring for someone's career is a different thing than helping to get the project get done. They can be the same, but they're not always the same.
Right. Especially with, very cross-functional projects, right? Like you're going to need somebody on design. You're going to need engineering teams. You're going to need, a specific go-to-market person. Yep. And all of those 3 people that I just named all have different managers, and you can't figure out that they're all working on the same project just by looking at the HR org chart.
You can't. And so my tactic when I create these, hey, I'm just drawing this picture of an org chart for myself so I understand like who's working on what. Don't worry, it's not official. It's just my way of understanding the organization. Is my thinking right on this? Am I understanding how people are working on a day-to-day basis? And what that does, that long setup, it's a very long setup, but what it does is it takes down everyone's guard around stuff, because I'm sure that like there's lots of different things that can get triggered for people. But one of the things that gets triggered, like, oh no, not another org chart that's wrong. I can't have another org chart. Don't worry, I'm not publishing it anywhere. It's okay.
Right. I'm not sharing this with anyone.
If you want it, I'll give it to you. Like, I'm not hoarding my information. Right? Because you don't want to have that kind of like, that type of mentality. We're both knowledge sharers, not knowledge hoarders, right? But, but so that they don't see this as something that can displace something or can upset their world, right? But you want to make sure that it's right. So like, that's the way that I couch whenever I share one of my pictures that I've created. And if they love it, I'm like, hey, you want to make it official? Great. Fantastic. You're a person who's allowed to make it official. Love that. Everyone wins.
Right. Or if you just want to keep it, for your own notes because it's helpful. Cool.
Yeah. 100%. And like all of this that you're talking about, like by working out in the open, it kind of builds your brand. It kind of builds your brand as a helper, right? It builds your brand as somebody who accepts feedback and wants collaboration, assuming that that's the way that you want to present yourself. Like we're both in that kind of mindset, right? And I think a lot of our listeners are as well. Yeah, how do you bring that forth? And it starts to paint your brand as a person, which we've had in a few episodes of the different types of ways that you can paint yourself in your brand. Like that's one way of setting that is across the organization.
Right. Leading with curiosity. If you want that to be part of your brand, like this is a good way to do it.
Yeah. So on your listening tours, like one of the other things that's the phrase "bring your whole self to work" came to mind. I absolutely hate that phrase, which is probably a whole nother episode, just because I think it's often disingenuous. But the reality of it is that every organization, and the reason I think it's disingenuous is every organization has a culture. Every organization has certain norms. Every organization has the things that make it feel comfortable for the people that work there. And learning that is something that, yes, it is in the handbook. Yes, there's the vision and values. Yes, there's the like onboarding of like, what do we value? Like that you go through all that HR stuff, right? They've all got one, right? Which is accurate. But it paints the main brush strokes of the painting of the culture. It doesn't give you a lot of the shading.
That's a great metaphor.
Thank you. It came to me. I love a good painting metaphor every once in a while. But that's figuring out an organization's culture can be really hard. But what you talked about earlier around those one-on-ones is a great way to suss out like what is the culture really in this organization.
Right. And, not just on one-on-ones, but any meetings that you're invited to, going back to your listening tour phrasing, right? Just listen, observe, figure out, pay attention to who's talking, who people defer to, what names come up often, right? Jack, we need to check with Jack, right?
Yeah.
Jack will know the most about this. And just take notes.
And I think it's so important to, for the first, let's say 2-3 sessions of a particular meeting type, it is to be as observant as possible. Even when you're at the higher levels of an organization, when you're expected to pontificate, I think it's really worthwhile figuring out how to bite your tongue, sit on your hands, whatever you need to do to really take it in and understand the dynamics. Because when I was at we were blitz scaling. So just hyper growth of an organization, I'll drop a definition into our glossary of blitz scaling. But for this particular story, for this particular context, we were onboarding. I was onboarding new senior managers and directors in engineering and managers in engineering every single week into the organization. And they were all coming in hot. They were all coming in hot, trying to prove their value. And I understand the reason why people come in hot, because you're like, hey, they're paying me a good salary. Hey, I want to see this thing succeed. Hey, all these hays. But when you come in hot, and especially when it's in an organization, it can be true of anything. But here, when it was happening literally every week, I had a new person pointing out the same exact problem every single week to me. Right? Every single week. And their observations were not wrong. But that's where I came up with a different metaphor. So I'm like, you're pointing out all the low-hanging fruit. Love that, right? I totally understand why you're pointing out all the low-hanging fruit. Can I tell you that low-hanging fruit has been hanging on that branch for X amount of period of time, and there's a reason that branch has not been touched. That thing is full of hornets. And let me tell you about the hornets that are inside of that apple that's on that low-hanging fruit of a tree. They don't necessarily, if you don't take that beat to learn about the culture, learn about the dynamics, learn about all of that, you're going to be pointing out low-hanging fruit that no one has the patience to hear about because they've heard about it. In that case, it was every week. And again, I learned I've got a pretty decent patience muscle. So I knew how to handle it and direct their energy into better places. But not everyone does. It's that you need to be able to figure that out. Oh, that's why they're not touching that fruit. They all see the fruit. They know the fruit is there. They wish the fruit was gone. They can't deal with the fruit for reasons. Let me find them out in a quiet corner rather than hot in the middle of a meeting.
Right. They all know that there is a hornet's nest that you can't see. But yeah, I think, that's a really good point of, on your listening tour, your goal should be to gather context, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gather information, just get the lay of the land.
Get the lay of the land and draw your proverbial map of the organization, the org chart being one of them, the dynamics being another one. Technical architecture, I often create, no matter what my role is, I often create logical technical architectures for my own consumption, what's happening, where, and how. Create all those things. Create your maps and figure out how you can navigate throughout the organization. Orient yourself within the organization. What did we say? And we had a different conversation around this. It's orienteering, right?
Yeah, it's orienteering during your orientation.
During your orientation. So it's a different, same root word, right? But think about it as orienting yourself, not just the way that HR and, leaders, which is, again, another important orientation portion, but there's other stuff.
Yeah, if we're continuing the metaphor of orienteering, it's like drawing your own maps, right?
It is.
If you were saying your architecture diagrams, I like to make, I like to use Post-its, right? I like to write steps of a workflow. And as I talk to a new person and learn new information, I'll either add more Post-its or move Post-its around. And then, when I think I have a decent picture, I'll sanity check that with somebody. But it's just learning the culture, the context, the everything of your new organization.
Yeah. And, I'm repeating myself a little bit here, but it's the way that you phrased that was really good because it doesn't assume that your version is the best version, because there are reasons that the other maps that exist of the organization exist today, right? Like I live in New York City and we just redid this year we've redone our subway maps. A lot of controversy around that. Locals are very upset. But the maps were done. I think the assessment is that the maps were done really to help people who are new to the city or tourists in the city. But those of us who have been here for more than a minute are like, oh, I missed my old one because they gave me this, that, and the other thing. But two maps, two different reasons, two different audiences, and one might be just more important to have on that wall for X, Y, and Z reasons. They may not make sense to you, but you can still have yours on the side. I still have my old subway maps hanging out because I'm not getting rid of those. I need them.
Right. Like, I mean, I live in Colorado, right? I've seen all kinds of different maps, like usually one that shows you the topography of an area,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And like, I'm not a mountaineering person. Like, okay, that's nice to know, but like, I want to know what roads exist there so that I can drive
Right.
there.
Or hiking trails or, like different things. And that's like Google Maps gives you all those lovely overlays, which 90% of the time I keep them all off. But they're there for good reasons.
Right.
So,
Right. Different maps for different reasons.
yeah, I'd say I think the last major thing before we start talking about it like a completely different dimension is making sure that we've woven it into all the stuff so far, but is checking in with people along the way to make sure that you're orienting yourself really well in the organization. You're getting started on stuff at the right time. Constantly check in with your onboarding buddy or your people manager or your team lead or whatever to make sure that you're on track to success, because there will be stuff that's in your 30, 60, 90-day plan, but there's also a lot of unspoken stuff that's there. So making sure that you're checking in with them.
Yeah, just to make sure that the maps that you're drawing are accurate, right?
That they're accurate, 100%. 100%. But I think that like all of this stuff, especially the checking in, becomes even more important when we're talking about remote cultures. My father's example from the beginning was an IRL experience from like the 70s, probably, right? So very, very different now in a remote world. I think that it can making sure that you have enough of those feedback loops when you are in a remote first culture is really, really important and can be a lot harder. And so give yourself grace when you're on. You have to put in a little bit more effort and you have to give yourself a little bit more grace when you're onboarding remotely.
Yeah, what comes to mind immediately for every company where I've had to onboard remotely, Slack.
Mm.
It's just figuring out how teams communicate with each other, how teams communicate status and information to other teams,
Yeah.
what channels exist, what that communication mapping looks like.
I love that. And it's even true for like, even if you're in a in-person role and you have a global team or you have multiple offices, finding the Slack, finding the Teams channels, finding the intranet, finding all the different ways that information flows in your organization and watching those and understanding them is really, really useful because the reality of it is I feel like I'm spelunking when I'm in a new role. I'll find, I'm like, oh, I found this. Is this real? They're like, oh, that should have been taken down 3 years ago. Okay, great. Like, oh, I saw this in this channel where they're actively chatting about X, Y, and Z. They're like, oh, I forgot about that. Like, like you learn an awful lot about things when you are exploring. Don't be a creeper. Like, let's not be creepers here. Let's be explorers. It's important. There is a differentiation. Like explorers who are generous and are not trying to colonize. Don't try and colonize the Teams channels and the Slack channels, and don't try and creep on them. Try and become a member of the community.
Yeah, what the specific example that comes to mind, and this has happened to me a lot. I'll be invited to like the team channel and they reference a message that's in another channel that I don't have access to. So it just says like private message. And so I'll ask somebody like, hey, so and so referenced this message and like had questions about it, but I can't see the original message. Is this a channel that I should be part of too?
Yeah, I think for me, it's so funny. It's so funny trying to thread the needle. It's something I struggle with in my career, when to be confident and when to take a slightly softer approach. Mine is usually, can you grab me a screenshot of that so I can see it? And then they'll invite me into the chat. Like, oh, I should invite you there. Like, oh, okay. Like it's same, different, right? Like two paths to the same result. Like, I think I need to be in there.
I think I need to be in there. And yeah, people are different, right? Teams are different based on what you've learned about the organization and the team so far.
Yeah.
Maybe you adjust your approach accordingly.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. We've covered a lot of good ground. Anything else that comes to mind for you? Like, I think it's like, do the same stuff that we've talked about across a lot of episodes, but like do it with more space and intentionality. It was gathering terminology, creating organizational documents and diagrams to help support you, but validate them and share them when it makes sense. Like, don't come in too darn hot, please.
Right.
That's it doesn't work for a lot of us coming in that darn hot, right? Giving yourself grace, giving other people grace along the way.
Right. Building those relationships, starting to build your brand at this company.
Build your brand, build your reputation. Build your brand. Two different things, but they're very intertwined. The Venn diagram is strong. We talked about that not too long ago. Amanda, thank you for yet another rich and lovely conversation. And I think that people will have gotten something good out of it, or at least they'll feel seen and validated, which to me is sometimes just so useful when I'm listening to podcasts or listening to conversations. So thank you, everyone, for listening. And I hope you join us next time when we cover another topic from the messy middle. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for taking time with us in the messy middle. Word of mouth remains the most powerful way for people to find us. If this episode sparked something for you, we'd love it if you'd subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app, download a few episodes, and share it with someone else who's navigating the in-between. Do you have ideas for future episodes or topics you'd like us to explore? You can find our feedback form at themessymiddlematters.com or in the show notes. Thank you for joining us on this journey. This work is better when we do it together. Until next time.